And thank you, ladies and gentlemen from across the Louisiana plain, for joining our platform today, where we are, in fact, advancing the cause of constitutional conservatism, elevating the cause of patriotic American citizens who desire to serve, and slowly but surely draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom. Welcome back, everyone. It's great to be with you again. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us. We thought we would be back with you on Friday, but there was just too much work for us to do left for the election, and I think it paid off. We've heard from a number of you over the weekend, and we can't thank you enough for your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. We're just overwhelmed by the gratitude that we have for you, our listeners, and the encouragement that you give us, the encouragement you've been. This has been a long, tough fight for us the last couple of weeks. But like I said, I think it paid off. Today, we're going to be taking a look at what happened on Saturday, the race outcomes for statewide elections, for the amendments, and for the Senate. And then we'll do a follow-up episode for the House races just because there were so many. But we want to talk to you about today what happened with those races and what remains to be decided. As always, if you're looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. And before we get into what happened on Saturday, let me read for us the scripture of the day. It is Psalm chapter 63, verses 5 through 11, and it says, I overflow with praise when I come before you, for the anointing of your presence satisfies me like nothing else. You are such a rich banquet of pleasure to my soul. I lie awake each night thinking of you and reflecting on how you help me like a father. I sing through the night under your splendor shadow, offering up to you my songs of delight and joy. With passion, I pursue and cling to you, because I feel your grip on my life. I keep my soul close to your heart. Those who plot to destroy me shall descend into the darkness of hell. They will be consumed by their own evil and become nothing more than dust under our feet. These liars will be silenced forever, but with the anointing of a king, I will dance and rejoice along with all his devoted lovers who trust in him. And this passage shows what a life lived in the presence of God looks like. David wrote this psalm when he was in exile in the wilderness of Judea. And look at how he kept his focus on the Lord rather than his circumstances. He prioritized worshiping the Lord and enjoying the pleasure of the presence of the Lord. He clung to the Lord, and he was boldly confident that the Lord would bring justice on his enemies. And because of that confidence in the Lord, he was able to celebrate alongside the lovers of God in the midst of extreme adversity. And I think that should speak very, very directly to us, that we should choose to celebrate alongside the lovers of God, because God's going to take care of our enemies.
Absolutely. And you think about it, Danielle, you think about all the ups and downs of the candidates that we endorsed and that we supported on the State of Freedom throughout these months and months leading up to these elections. And it was not always smooth sailing for many of these candidates who won. I mean, running for office is a very, very challenging prospect. And we had a chance to speak to a number of these candidates, off air during the campaign, and about some of the difficulties and challenges they were facing and some of the problems along the way, but they all stayed strong like David. They all kept the faith. And by and large, the candidates that we supported and endorsed won in the final analysis or are going into a runoff. And it's just so powerful a vindication. It's interesting that you would read from David today that he's writing while he's in exile, but he remains faithful, and ultimately, as we know only too well, the victory is his. And that is exactly what occurred in most of these races. It's powerful testament.
It is a powerful testimony, and I have to just jump in and clarify that, of course, our enemies, are not flesh and blood. I just want to kind of make that very clear. that this is a spiritual battle we're in. We're not talking about battling against people. We're not talking about people as our enemies. Even though people may behave as enemies, we know that their enemy is Satan and and his demons. Our enemy is not a person, and I just want to make that very, very crystal clear before we before we move on, because we're not fighting against people. We we love people.
Exactly. We're not fighting against flesh and blood, and we have nothing personal against any of the candidates who we did not endorse, or even those who we opposed and whose record we exposed. You're right. We are not fighting against flesh and blood, but we're fighting. This really is a spiritual battle. But sometimes during campaigns, for us, as we're supporting candidates, and for the candidates themselves, the devil has a way of trying to demoralize and discourage and cause people to want to turn back and quit. And that did not happen. And it is so nice to see that in most cases, our candidates were vindicated and, again, either did win or are in runoffs. But before we get into any of the specific races, I wanted to clarify with our listeners again so that everybody knows the criteria by which the State of Freedom and LeCAG supports and endorses candidates. We look at everything through one lens when we're evaluating whether to support a candidate or legislator or any public official in Louisiana, and that is, are they the most likely, either based upon what they say or what they have done, to commit themselves to representing faithfully the interests of Louisiana citizens across the state. And to us, that means honoring the Constitution. And that means honoring individual freedom and liberty in a world and in a country that seems to be increasingly encroaching upon that freedom and that liberty. And that is how we make our evaluations. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball. We're not 100% right on everything that we say and do. All we can do is look at the candidates, look at the leaders, and make the very best determination that we can. I say that to say this, Danielle. The fact that there were a number of races where we maybe didn't even make an endorsement is because there were a number of very good candidates who we thought would do a good job, and we don't believe in co-endorsements, so we didn't make an endorsement. And in the races where we made an endorsement, there may well have been other good candidates who may serve very well, but we have to make a choice. We have to make a decision. And again, the decision and the criteria that we base that decision on is who is most likely, in our view, to have the courage and the backbone to stand up for Louisiana citizens in an environment where the pull and the pressure is always to become self-enriching, to become somewhat corruptive, and to allow oneself to fall under the influences of people who do not have the best interests of Louisiana citizens at heart, who can stand strong, who will stand strong. And it was on that basis that we made our endorsement decisions.
Yes, and maybe just to add to that, Chris, as you mentioned, our viewpoint is pretty, our view is limited. So we tried to speak to as many candidates as we could. We sent out surveys and we did engage quite a number of people, but there were some races that we just didn't reach into. And then there, like you said, there were some races where we did make some hard choices because there were really great candidates. And I think at the end of the day, that shows us that the people who live in those districts have nothing but gains to make if there are good people who are fighting for them in the same race. So I think we'll get into some of that today. Why don't we start, Chris, with the governorship? Jeff Landry won outright with over 51% of the vote. That's not news to anyone who's listening to this right now, but it is exciting, and I think it's something that's really going to set us up for success.
Absolutely. I think that Jeff Landry's victory is a direct testament to the fact that he, among all the candidates, had a track record of standing up for fundamental liberty, fundamental freedom, specifically as it relates to the First Amendment, as it relates to vaccine mandates, and other issues of deep concern to Louisiana citizens. He stood up. he didn't just talk, he put his money where his mouth is, and Louisiana citizens across the state responded to that. And I really do believe that his victory in the primary is evidence of the fact that Louisiana citizens are concerned first and foremost about the steady erosion of their freedoms. And Jeff Landry represented a fight against that steady erosion. And I believe that he will continue to do so as governor. And I'm so thankful that we will now have a governor who will work with a constitutional conservative legislature instead of against them.
Yeah, and I think it's very fair to say that he will have a mandate to govern. He does have a mandate to govern, which is exciting. And hopefully, it doesn't feel like it's an election that was fraught from the beginning. The amount of people that got behind him is a strong showing, and that I think that's pretty indisputable.
Yeah, it is indisputable, Danielle, and I think it's an unequivocal mandate. I think anytime you win a statewide election in a primary with that many candidates, that is an unequivocal mandate that what you have campaigned on resonates with Louisiana citizens, and now it's important to put it into practice to make sure that the policy decisions that are made reflect the representations made in the campaign. And I think Jeff Landry is sincere, and I believe that he's going to do an awful lot of good for the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, I think so too. And moving to Lieutenant Governor, Billy Nungesser was reelected also with a pretty strong mandate, 65.5% mandate voted for him. Now, we didn't weigh in on this race, Chris, because this is one of those races that we kind of mentioned at the outset. There were two really great candidates.
Yeah, we made a decision that Billy Nungesser had done a good job as Lieutenant Governor, and no doubt will do a good job in another term. But Elbert Guillory, also African-American, longtime political figure in Louisiana, would have done a good job as well. And Elbert has stood up for conservative values consistently over his political tenure. And we just couldn't bring ourselves to endorse one of those two candidates over the other because we thought both of them would do a good job. We're obviously pleased with Billy Nungesser getting reelected, and I think he's going to continue to be a good spokesman for the state of Louisiana, which is the primary job of the Attorney General.
Lieutenant Governor,
I'm sorry. To revitalize tourism and to make sure that people looking at the state of Louisiana see it as an attractive place to come vacation, invest their resources, and just enjoy all the good things Louisiana has to offer. And I just don't think there's really anybody any better at promoting that than Billy Nungesser.
Yeah, although Elbert Guillory did have the best campaign slogan of all time, which was "Louisiana needs a pawpaw." So I hope he has another reason to use that, because that was a very epic campaign slogan.
Yeah, I really think it was. And Louisiana really does need a pawpaw. Everybody needs a good pawpaw.
Exactly. Moving on to Secretary of State. Our pick, Brandon Trosclair, lost to Republican Nancy Landry. The votes were spread across 8 candidates. Nancy got 19-ish% of the vote, and she's going to run off against Gwen Collins Greenup, who came in at around 19% of the vote. Obviously, this is a huge disappointment to us.
Yeah, it's a very big disappointment. The silver lining in this, though, is that Brandon Trosclair made about 177 stops throughout the state of Louisiana. There is no doubt that he raised real public awareness about the vulnerabilities of our election system in Louisiana. He was not able to get across the finish line in the end, probably because of the media presence that many of the other candidates had in the last 2 weeks, being able to get up on television and expose their campaigns to a broad swath of Louisiana citizens. Brandon was not able to do that. However, I am so gratified that he raised public awareness across the state about the problems with our election system that have got to be addressed and have got to be rectified. And he made a commitment to us, Danielle, on our show, that he will continue to move forward and to do whatever he can to make sure that the deficiencies in our election system are rectified. And that is a powerful contribution that he has made and will continue to make.
It is. And of course, at the back of everybody's mind is, well, if the election system's not fixed yet, then how can we trust the outcomes of this election? And so I just put that out there at the back of my mind as well. It's hanging out there. I don't have a resolution for that, but, we obviously are just moving forward. But I'll be very interested. And I think Chris will try and talk to Brandon and Dr. Russ in the days to come, maybe have them on the show and get their take on, what the outcome of this election means and if there's a path forward for them.
Yes, I think Brandon has laid the foundation. The great contribution that he made here, Danielle, is that he has laid the foundation for continuing to work and resolve the problems in our election system, the hundreds of thousands of people on our voter rolls who don't belong there, the vulnerabilities in our machine-based voting system, which really should not be in dispute anymore. The fact that we can't audit our elections in Louisiana. These are issues that have to be addressed no matter who the Secretary of State is, if we're going to have confidence in our voting system. So I'm thankful to Brandon, to Dr. Russ, and to everybody on the election integrity team who has worked so hard to raise public awareness of those important issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to talking to them soon after the dust settles and maybe they get a few hours more of sleep.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Next on to Attorney General. Liz Murrill won, which is very exciting. She will face a runoff. For a little while there, it looked like she might win outright as well, but she came in at about 45% of the vote.
Yes, we had, and as you know, Danielle, we had Liz on our show twice, and she had some very broad exposure across the state. From being on the State of Freedom, we put her some audiograms, clips of her interview up on our social media, and boy, that spread like wildfire. She was talking about her son and the vaccine, talking about what she would like to do regarding crime in Louisiana, and most importantly, the issue that she consistently emphasized on the campaign trail was making sure that she honors the Constitution and stands up to increasing federal encroachment on our rights. She has a track record as Solicitor General as having done just that with this case at the Fifth Circuit involving the Biden administration's suppression of speech. The reason why I think Liz was successful is that she knew what her message was, and she was consistent throughout her campaign with that message. And I think the core of it was individual freedom, individual liberty, and standing up for the Constitution as Attorney General. And I think that resonated broadly, and obviously the results show that. I wish she had won it in a primary, but I think if she continues to stay on message, I think it won't be long before we are calling her Attorney General-elect.
Yes, perfect. And then next is Treasurer. John Fleming won with 44%. He'll be in a runoff. Now, we haven't spent any time talking about the Treasurer's race, Chris, but we did make an endorsement of John Fleming.
Yes, and the reason why is that John Fleming was in the U.S. Congress from, I think it was 2007 to 2017, 2018. He was one of the founding members of the Freedom Caucus in Washington, D.C. He served under President Trump as an advisor. He is a real conservative. And importantly, as treasurer, I think he'll be a real fiscal conservative. And it's important in that position when it comes to the stewardship and the handling of taxpayer money. I'm very comfortable with Fleming. I'm glad we made the endorsement. And I think you and I talked about at some point having him on the State of Freedom, and I think we should.
Cool. Yep. We need to reach out to him. Chris, let's move now to the amendments. There were 4 amendments that were on the ballot. Is that right? 4?
4 amendments on the October ballot, and there will be 4 more on the November ballot, which we will cover.
Okay. So the first one up, or I should say the amendment number 1, so we're not getting it confused, was the Zuckerbucks ban put up by soon-to-be Senator Blake McGuiz.
Yes, Senator-elect Blake Miguez. Yes, this was the constitutional amendment ushered through the legislature by Blake Miguez that will finally keep dark, illicit, foreign, non-governmental money out of our election process in Louisiana. And it is such a big deal. As we've said before, Danielle, it's not the only component, but it is certainly one of the components of having a clean, secure election system. And it passed comfortably. And I'm so thankful for that.
72.5%.
72.5% of the people who voted believe that it's time to rid Louisiana elections of this corrupt, dark money. And I think it is so important that that passed. Obviously, we supported it, and Blake talked about it on our show. Stuart Cathy talked about it when he came on the show. We were at the legislature pushing hard to get that passed through the legislature so it could appear on the October ballot as a constitutional amendment. And boy, I'm very gratified that that was successful.
Yeah. The next one up was the one that reaffirmed the right of assembly at church, basically during COVID, saying that people have a freedom of worship, and where they worship, also they get to choose where that is.
Yes, because during COVID, you had John Bell Edwards basically saying, oh, yeah, you can worship, but you can worship in your home, but you can't leave and you can't go worship at your church. Meanwhile, the casinos are open, the abortion clinics are open, and other places are open, but people can't go worship in their church. So Liz Muriel brought this constitutional amendment that says, no, we're not going to go there. We need to make sure we codify in the Constitution that the location of religious worship is just as important as the fact of religious worship. And that passed comfortably as well. So in the future,
79%. And just a quick correction, it was Senator Beth Mizell, right?
Yeah, oh yes, I'm sorry. It was Senator Beth Mizell who brought that through the Senate. And it's very important the next time the government tries to lower its heavy hand in one of these emergency pandemic shutdowns. And we have it in the Constitution. No, constitutional rights are not suspended during an emergency. And right now in our Constitution, as a matter of fundamental fact and practice, the location of religious worship is a matter of fundamental importance. Nobody can ever the government can never restrict someone's religious worship as far as where they choose to worship ever again in Louisiana. I think that is just as important as amendment number 1 for different reasons.
Yeah, foundational. It's absolutely foundational. And of course, like many things, we should never have had to even have this come to the ballot. But here we did, and the people affirmed it. And I think, hopefully that puts the governor and the future governors and any future governments on notice that the people will worship when they want, how they want, and they have the freedom to do so because this is the United States of America.
It is the United States of America, and fundamental constitutional freedoms are not suspended during a time of emergency.
Yeah. The next one up, Chris, was the paying down of retirement debt in our system.
Yes, and I believe this one passed as well, correct?
It did at 56%.
Yes, 56%. I was a little bit, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised that it was 56-44. I was hoping that the margin would be larger, but a win is a win. And this is, again, the constitutional amendment that simply requires 25% of non-recurring taxpayer revenue to be allocated to the paying down of retirement debt, which we need. We need to pay down debt. This is connected to the explosion of the spending cap at the end of the 2023 legislative session, where we had these legislators who said, whatever, we have extra money from the federal government, let's just spend it on whatever we want, on football stadiums and band uniforms and museums and everything else, and forget about the debt that this state is in and paying down debt for future generations. Well, this constitutional amendment requires 25% of non-recurring revenue to be dedicated to just that purpose. And so I think it's an extremely important amendment that was passed. And I just think basically you put it well the other day on the phone, Danielle, where you said something about a limit on the debit card or something. I can't remember exactly what you said, but I thought that was so well put.
Yeah. And, Chris, the reason I think this didn't pass as well as it could have is just because of the way that these amendments get worded. And I hope we can pass legislation next session that demands plain language amendments, because people just can't read them and understand the legalese and the background. I think the people who put them on those recommended ballots that come in the mail and everything, really slant them to the way that they want people to vote, but don't give the backstory of how this came about and why it's needed. And I think that has to be part of the storytelling that's in the amendment. What this would mean in practical terms needs to be spelled out for us.
Absolutely, and I do think that that is something that warrants legislative action, because the wording, you're so right, Danielle, of some of these amendments are so murky that it's very difficult to understand what it's supposed to do. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people who've called me and said, Chris, so a yes vote means this and a no vote means this. Does a yes vote mean that I'm for this, or does a no vote mean that I'm for this? Because it's so
Exactly.
unclear. It's like
I know. Vote yes to prohibit. It's like, no, just let your yes mean yes.
exactly, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. So I think you're right, Danielle. I think there was some interpretive confusion about this. It's my hope that this time next year, when the State of Freedom has been on air for another year, that our listening base will be so broad at that point that there will be very, very little confusion about the amendments, and people can know what to do simply by listening to the State of Freedom. And we are rapidly getting to that point. But I do agree with you that we're going to have to address this legislatively as far as the phrasing of these amendments, and make it clear to them that many people do not understand what these amendments mean because of the draftsmanship of the wording of them.
100%. And you know me, I just think it's by design, where perhaps it's not, but it's probably drafted by lawyers, but it's not written for lawyers. So that's the big disconnect.
Exactly.
We can move on from that. The last one was one that we were against, Chris, and this one was giving local governments the ability to restrict nonprofits.
Yeah, and the main reason why we oppose this is because the government, the entities that would be determining whether or not a tax exempt status is revoked, are the same entities, the same local governments who have a vested interest in collecting taxes. So if that doesn't create an incentive to revoke tax exemption status for nonprofits, I'm not really sure what does. So that was the conflict of interest there. Having the fox guarding the hen house was our objection to that. And also the fact that this just appears to be a local issue that should be handled by local governments if they are competent. I don't believe that it belongs in the Constitution. The Constitution is a document that outlines the broad principles of a free republic, not rules and regulations regarding tax exempt status of property owners in Louisiana. I don't believe that belongs in the Constitution. If the legislature wants to pass a law that makes that applicable statewide, well, then they're free to do that. But I don't believe that it is something that belongs in the Constitution.
Yeah. And as Stephen Schwiber said when he was on the show, the Constitution of the state of Louisiana should be about the size of the Constitution of the United States, at least comparable. It could probably stand to be slimmer. And that's a pretty thin document. So, ours is probably about a 1/4 inch thick on giant paper, because I have a copy right here. So yeah, I agree with you. It's just getting more and more complicated and reaching into subjects that it doesn't need to be addressing. So moving on from that, that's the wrap up of the amendments. And now we'll just head on into the Senate races. So in the Senate, there were 20 seats that went unopposed. So those didn't run or have races. Of the races that we endorsed, there were 9 wins and 4 losses, and no one we endorsed in the first go round is in a runoff in the Senate. So if we're just going to start at the top of the list, Senate District 1, that was Ray Garofalo, who we had on the show, versus Bob Owen, also known as Absent Owen to us. Shockingly, Bob Owen got 60% and Ray got 40%, and we're still scratching our heads about this one.
Well, scratching our heads to some degree. Ray Garofalo is a demonstrated conservative. He has been a true patriot in the legislature, and the Senate really could use Ray Garofalo. Didn't work out for him. I think part of this is that Ray, in redistricting, I believe was districted, if I can use that as a verb, out of part of his original House district, and the new district that was created in this Senate included more of Bob Owen's district than it did Ray Garofalo. So Ray had an uphill battle here in introducing himself to really a new constituency. And I believe that he was not able to do that, obviously, successfully, but he ran a clean race. He ran an honorable race. And I don't think we've heard the end of Ray Garofalo. And what we can hope for now is that Bob Owen will go in and do what's necessary to faithfully represent the interests of his district. And if he does that, then he'll have no issue with the State of Freedom or with LeCag. And if he doesn't, then of course we're going to hold him accountable for every vote that he makes. And it's important that he understands that.
Yep, absolutely. And then the next one up on our endorsement list, Chris, was Senate District 6. This was Rick Edmonds. He beat Barry Ivy, who was another Republican, 61-39. This is a race that we did weigh in and make the endorsement, but we did not have Rick on the show.
No, we didn't have Rick on the show, but we were very glad and happy to endorse Rick. Rick has been overall a good state representative, and I believe is going to be a good state senator. His opponent, Barry Ivy, is not a constitutional conservative. I've seen him in the legislature. I've seen the things that he's supported. I've seen the things that he's opposed. You may not recall this, Danielle. You probably will when I mention it to you. But Barry Ivy was one of the ones who voted out of committee House Bill 490, which was the bill that would have allowed the third-party activist groups to go into the high schools and register these high school students to vote, which is a recipe for fraud in our election system, a recipe for third-party advocacy in the high schools, which would have just been, it was a terrible piece of legislation. But Barry Ivy helped vote that out of committee. He's done a number of other things that were questionable. Rick Edmonds clearly was the preferable candidate there. I'm glad we endorsed Rick and very gratified that Rick will be in the Senate now.
Yes, we're shaping up to have a really, really strong Senate. I hope, the actions that we see taken match up to our expectations. But looking at these races in hindsight and seeing how far we've come, I really, really think we have a lot to look forward to. And maybe the Senate is going to be a much, much stronger House than it has been, or a much stronger body than it has been.
Absolutely. There's no question some of the new faces in the Senate are going to help change the culture there. And hopefully Rick will be one of them.
Yes, I hope so too. Next up, Senate District 8, Tim Kerner Jr. This one really kicked me in the gut. He lost to Patrick Connick by a little over than 1,000 votes. And, I find it suspect, but that's just me. I think he ran such a good race. He is such an earnest and likable guy. He clearly cares about his constituents, the area that he lives in, the district, and he is somebody who we've seen roll up his sleeves and get to work, not waiting for other people to get in and get their hands dirty. So we're super bummed that we won't be seeing him having a seat as the senator of Senate District 8, but I bet that this is not the last we see of Tim either.
Oh, not at all. Tim is very vibrant, very energetic, has laid a great foundation for his future. I am disappointed as well that Tim did not win that race. He fell 1,200 votes short a total of about 23,000 votes cast, and Tim fell about 1,200 votes short. Again, he was fighting against a well-established old political dynasty over in Jefferson and Plaquemines Parish. And I'm just very, very gratified by the honorable race that he ran, the issues that he brought forward. And I agree with you 100%, Danielle, that Timothy Kerner's name will be heard again and probably very soon.
Yeah, I think so. Senate District 12, Beth Mizell, she had two opponents, and her race could have reasonably gone through to November, but she pulled it out and won almost 80% of the vote in the first go.
Very, very thankful for Senator Mizell. She's the one who killed that atrocious bill by Buddy Mincy to create the Interstate Teacher Compact, which would have surrendered Louisiana sovereignty. She helped kill that in the Senate Education Committee. Very thankful to her for that. And of course, it was Beth Mizell's bill, Constitutional Amendment 2, that passed, that we talked about a few moments ago, that establishes that the location of religious worship are matters of high priority and fundamental importance. She's done a lot of other good things as well, but Beth Mizell has served faithfully in the Senate and will be returning.
Yes. And the next race is Senate Race 13, or District 13. This was Valerie Hodges, and she beat the tar out of Buddy Mincy, which was very fun to watch.
Very fun to watch. Valerie was on our show twice, and so happy to have her on there. Worked very hard on our social media to get the word out, not only the positive word about Representative Hodges, but the negative facts about Buddy Mincy. And it is, of all the races, I would have to say this was the most personally satisfying to me, because Valerie Hodges is such a patriot. Valerie brought the bill that protects land in Louisiana.
That's right.
From foreign purchase, which is unbelievable. I saw an article recently by Mike Pompeo that really establishes that China and other countries really are trying to move on the infrastructure inside of states throughout the United States. This legislation will help to prevent that from happening here. Buddy Mincy did nothing for us in the state legislature except squander our sovereignty, or try to, while Valerie Hodges was trying to protect it. It was a very ugly race, Danielle. Very ugly race, but Valerie beat him almost 2-1. So Buddy Mincy is now permanently retired from elective office, and I am breathing a sigh of relief, and I hope many people out in District 13 are as well.
Yes, and this is kind of a pickup for us, Chris, right? Because this was the seat that was previously held by Senator Rogers Pope.
Yes, Rogers Pope, who endorsed Buddy Mincy. Say we anything else about Rogers Pope.
There you go.
So Valerie Hodges will be in the Senate, a new face to help change the culture there. I'm so glad you brought that up. This will be a new ad in the Senate, and she's going to make an influence there.
She will. Senate District 19, Greg Miller beat his Democrat opponent handily. That was 69 to 31%. We didn't have Greg on the show, but we did endorse him. Absolutely endorsed him. And by the way, Danielle, our endorsements went to thousands and thousands of people. They were spread everywhere. And very happy that we endorsed former Representative Miller. He's done some good things in the legislature. He certainly has not done anything to hurt the conservative cause. And in light of a relatively good track record by him, plus the fact that he was running against a liberal Democrat, 68 to 31 victory there. Very gratified to have a solid Republican moving into the Senate. Yep. And then Senate District 20, this is my senator, Big Mike Facey, won by 88%. He won 88% of the vote. The man is very well liked down here. Yes, down in your neck of the woods. What a great guy. You recall Mike Facey, Danielle, was one of the ones who stood up for this transgender prohibition, worked very, very hard. He has stood up on minors, has stood up against these vaccine mandates and medical freedom. He's just been a real fighter in the legislature, and I'm glad he's returning to the Senate. I'm glad we endorsed him. Yes. Me too. Me too. And I look forward to seeing what he's going to do this term. And then Senate District 21. This is another one that kind of felt like a gut punch. This was our pick, Steven Schwiber, came in third with 25% of the vote. Now, I guess it really bears mentioning that he had, I think, 2% name ID when he started running, and he ran against two names that are strongly entrenched in local government and even statewide government with Brett Allen II, the outgoing senator from this seat. You know, his son was on the ballot, and people in the area that I've spoken to, of course, think that perhaps people thought that they were still voting for the father. They weren't necessarily clear. They just saw the name that they recognized and made the vote. So he was definitely in an uphill battle here, but he came away with a pretty strong showing for a first time out with such little name ID to start out with.
Danielle, nobody knew who he was. I mean, he's from St. Mary, but you had Terrebonne. I think you had
Iberia.
This was a very big Senate district, and in much of that territory, nobody knew who Steven Schwiber was, and he gets 25% of the vote. I mean, look, there were a total of 18. There were a total of almost 25,000 votes cast in that election, and Steven Schwiber comes within 1,600 votes of getting into a runoff. I mean, let me tell you, if I were Steven, I would be, I won't say that I'd be on cloud nine if I were Steven Schwiber, but you talk about setting up a foundation for a future run. This does. Steven, it's not like he came in here and gets 6% of the vote, 8% of the vote. That is a substantial number of votes to get 25% and get that close to a runoff. I'm very proud of Steven Schwiber. I'm proud of the fact that we endorsed him, and I have no doubt in my mind, none, that we endorsed the right candidate. And I want to reiterate in this context, Danielle, what I said a little while ago. We don't endorse candidates. We don't just go down a list and say, well, this person's probably going to win this and they're a Republican, so endorse them. This person's probably going to win this, so they're a Republican, endorse them. This person's a Republican, endorse them. We don't just go through and say, well, who's most likely to win? That's not how we do it. That doesn't do a service to conservative citizens in Louisiana. We look at the candidates based upon how they are likely to legislate and whether or not they understand the issues and will have the courage to stand up and fight for citizens. Schwiber was the choice, if that's your criteria, in that race. And I'm proud of his effort, and I know that we will hear his name again.
Yeah, he has a very bright future, and I'm looking forward to working with him in whatever capacity he chooses to move forward.
Absolutely.
The next one is one that we were very, very excited about. This is Senate District 22. Blake Miguez was in a race with four opponents, and he won outright with 61% of the vote. The most exciting thing about this is that he is replacing a senator who did us 0.0 favors, and that was Fred Mills.
Fred Mills, the notorious Fred Mills, who, as you said, if it's possible to be perhaps for being a bit charitable, we'll say that he did us no favors. He actually did us great harm. Yeah, Fred Mills did us great harm, and there is no greater contrast between the outgoing Fred Mills and the incoming Blake Miguez. 61% of the vote there in Senate District 22. You know, we had Blake on twice, and really enjoyed him sharing his vision on our show. We spread that out there very broadly. And in Blake's race, Danielle, and this is worth mentioning because I saw pictures demonstrating this, all of the usual suspects in the establishment went over to Lafayette and endorsed his primary opponent, Hugh Andre. The Paula Davises, the Clay Scheck-Snyders, the Paige Cortezes, the Stuart Bishops, all of the people who have contributed to the dysfunction in this state and to driving the state into the ground, all appeared and endorsed Hugh Andre, and the citizens of District 22 rejected that and overwhelmingly elected Blake Miguez because he directly stood up to it and he called it what it was, the good old boy network that are driving the state into the ground. I am very gratified at those results.
Yeah, and I bet he's not going to forget who stood up and basically anointed his opponent for the job, because we know that Blake's going to do a great job. He's such a leader and such a fighter, and he's exactly the breath of fresh air that the Senate needs. And we'll have a few fresh fresh air. I don't know. Fix it, Chris. You just take over. I can't talk anymore. Apparently,
you know what? It's almost
breaths
like
of fresh air.
It's
there
almost
we go.
like it's almost like we're so excited we're both becoming breathless, and breath is of fresh air up in here. I don't care how you say it, as long as I can breathe the fresh air, baby. Breath is all day.
All right.
So here we go. But anyway, so yeah, and the last thing I want to say about this, Danielle, it's just important for people to remember the kind of guy Blake is. The reason why the first constitutional amendment was on the ballot was because of Blake Miguez, the one that keeps the illicit money out of our election process. He's a great man, and you're right. I don't think he's going to forget the people who lined up against him. He's a Christian. He'll forgive, but he won't forget.
Yeah, exactly, because we have to be wise. Next up is Senate 25, and that was Mark Abraham, who we endorsed, and but we didn't have him on the show. He beat his Democrat challenger with 80% of the vote. I would call that pretty decisive.
Yes, and Mark Abraham was one of the ones who helped to kill. He contributed to the killing of Buddy Mincy's teacher compact bill in the Teacher Education Committee. On the Senate Education Committee, Mark Abraham has been very responsive when we've had issues to reach out to him. I think he's done a good job overall. 80%, not even a race there. So Mark Abraham will be returning to the state Senate.
Exciting, exciting. Next up, Senate 31, Alan Seabaugh, who won with 54% of the vote. If I recall, Chris, he got challenged by basically a good old boy that the Good Old Boy Network put up. But we know that Alan's a fighter, and I'm super excited to see him. Also, he will be replacing Louis Bernard.
Yes, Louis Bernard, who really was a rhino. Certainly no Alan Seabaugh, but this will be a new face in the Senate. Alan Seabaugh, who's served us so well in the House for many, many years, the good old boy establishment up in North Louisiana. And Seabaugh is one of these guys, Danielle, who has the ability to go in and begin to change the culture in the Senate from day one. And I believe has the motivation and the backbone to do it.
Yeah. When Alan walks into a room or walks up into a conversation, he just has a presence. And I haven't shared this out loud before, but I call it the Seabaugh swagger. Like, he just walks in and you know that this man means business and people are going to pay attention to him, and that's what he's bringing.
The Seabaugh swagger, I like that. We're going to definitely have to coin that one and use that frequently. By the way, did we mention, Danielle, you probably did. Oh, yeah, you did mention that Blake Miguez will be new in the Senate, and he's taking okay, good. So he's a new face in the Senate, and so is Seabaugh.
Yep. And then in 33, Stuart Cathy held on to his seat and beat the good old boy Ned White with a pretty substantial margin, 53-47. Not bad considering the amount of money that was being thrown in his opponent's race.
No, and this was one of these guys who Stuart Cathy told us when he came on our show. He said, well, he called down several times. He tried to buy me, and I didn't allow him to do that. And so he then invested about $700,000 in this race and tried to buy the seat. We had Stuart on the show shortly before the election. He was one of our last guests that we had who was running for re-election. Stuart has done a very good job in the state Senate. We pushed him and promoted him hard everywhere. And you're right, it was a relatively comfortable victory in light of all the money that was spent against him. It just gives me hope. It gives me hope that if you have the right message and you stay on focus and you get your message to the people, you can win even against people who have a lot more money than you have.
And what a tremendous amount of money. $700,000 for a state Senate seat is just outrageous. So I hope, I'm glad he didn't win. That's, I guess, his money was not well spent, and you know, we still get to keep Senator Kathy. So I'm excited about that.
I'm excited about it too. And, we worked with Senator Kathy. I worked with him very, very closely to get the nullification passed, resolution passed in 2023 to declares Louisiana solemn right to nullify federal acts of tyranny. Such an important resolution. Stewart fought hard on that. Alan fought hard on the House side. And Stewart, we need him in the Senate. And I'm so, so glad. And Stewart was right. He said before that election, he said, I believe the people are smart enough to see through all this nonsense, and I believe I'm going to be okay. And sure enough, he was.
He was. He knew his constituents.
He did.
And then, okay, the next district is 37. We endorsed Randy Bush in that race, and I just think Randy Bush is such a gift. I really enjoyed talking to him. He's such a down-to-earth guy. He loves the Constitution. He loves the people of the district. He loves the area, and really has, had vision for where to take that. He unfortunately lost to Bill Wheat by a wide margin. In fact, Randy only garnered about 26% of the vote. I think, Chris, and you can correct me, but I mean, Bill Wheat had pretty strong name ID out there, and he had probably a lot of money behind him.
He had a lot of money behind him, tremendous amount of money behind him, a lot of which was coming from outside of the district and even outside of the state, which is rather suspicious. He had about a 25-1 advantage on Randy Bush as far as money, and therefore was able to really sort of flood the mailers, flood the TV, and Randy really could not compete with that. In light of all of the disadvantages that Randy had in that race, he still got 26% of the vote there. I think he's going to continue to be in the fight in the future. And I'll tell you now, we are going to hold Bill Wheat accountable for every vote that he makes. He knows that. And I hope that he votes the right way and does the right things. And we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. And I think, he'll be surrounded by stronger, more conservative, more constitutionalist colleagues. And that I am optimistic that will help a good deal. And regardless, Chris, we do have to say that he may not be the strongest constitutional candidate. However, he is replacing Barrow Peacock, who was far worse than not a constitutional candidate.
Yeah, well, you're right, because it's the newly created District 37, and I think that Bill Wheat is a fundamentally decent person. My criticism of Bill Wheat has been simply that he's weak, and he simply goes where he feels the most pressure. Well, with new senators, as you said, like Miguez and Seabaugh and Hodges, and people like Stewart Cathy returning to the Senate, I believe the influence for good on him is going to be very, very steady there. And hopefully he will do the right thing and make the right votes.
Yeah, I think he will. So now, okay, we only have one left, and that is Senate District 38, was where we did not actually make an endorsement. We didn't endorse there because all of the candidates were pretty strong and pretty conservative, but we have reason to believe that the winner will do a really good job in the Senate. He's coming over from the House, and that's Thomas Presley, who we worked with a fair bit in the House.
We did work with him a fair bit in the House. And the reason why we made no endorsement in that race is because we know that John Milkovich also is a good conservative. And when John Milkovich was in the state Senate a number of years ago, he sponsored some very strong pro-life legislation. He was always advocating for individual freedom and liberty against government oppression. And we just could not bring ourselves to endorse in that race because he is good, and also because Thomas Presley is good and did a very good job in the 2023 session. You recall, Danielle, that Thomas Presley is the primary representative who killed the bill that would allow 7-year-olds to be jabbed by a pharmacist or a pharmacy intern with no medical prescription or no awareness of the kid's documented medical history. Presley also did everything he could to get Kathy Edmondson's WHO bill through the Health and Welfare Committee in the House. Unfortunately, there were not enough Thomas Presleys there. So I have a lot of confidence in Thomas. He's been on our show. I was very impressed when he came on, and I think that he is going to make a big impact in the state Senate, and I believe he will do the right things.
Yeah, we certainly wish him the best, and all of the winners, we wish the best. Because if they do well, we all do well. And the bottom line is we just want to move this state in the right direction.
The people who we were successful in getting elected or contributing to the election of, the new faces, are going to change the culture of the state Senate. And that's what makes me so excited. When you have people like Representative Valerie Hodges going in and replacing Rogers Pope, when you have people like Blake Maguez going in and replacing Fred Mills, when you have people like Alan Seabaugh going into the Senate and replacing a Louis Bernard and others, these are people who are going to go in and make sure that the Senate is no longer a place where good legislation goes to die.
Yes, and just to reiterate, okay, of the races we endorsed, because I don't have that number in front of me, 9 won, 4 lost, no one that we endorsed is in a runoff. Of the 20 senators who ran unopposed, 13 are Republicans. So if we're looking at the total number of Republicans in the Senate to date, between the unopposed and those just elected in October, we will have 28 versus the previous class of legislators. We had 27 Republicans and 12 Dems. I think the reason we know that we're going to have 28 is because there are 2 final runoffs in the Senate, and one is a Republican-only race and one is a Democrat-only race. So that's pretty clear how those are going to shake out.
Very, very excited about this. But when as far as what we know now, with a 9-4 record, 9-4, Danielle, that gets you into the first round of the playoffs in the NFL, and we'll see what happens from this point forward. So I'm very proud of our record, and again, I'm also proud of the endorsements that we made for the candidates who fell short. And I have enormous respect for Randy Bush, for Steven Schwiber, for Ray Garofella, who put themselves out there, who worked very, very hard. And I would not change. If I knew when we endorsed them what I know right now, I would not change that endorsement, because we endorse based upon principle, not based primarily on politics.
Yeah, or outcome. And I think, Chris, it bears mentioning that the titles of these political parties mean very little until the rubber meets the road. Now, a lot of these people, we know they have track records, and that's what we base our optimism on, and I think rightfully so. But we'll see how this all shakes out in real time come when, I guess, starting in January, we'll have a couple days of session, and then real session starts up in March.
Yes, we will, and we will be there, and we will be alert and vigilant in protecting the interests of Louisiana citizens. And I can't wait, Danielle, to get into maybe on our next podcast. I can't wait to get into the results on the House side in these many of these elections, because we had some great results there as well.
We did. And, we thought about doing it all in one episode, but we are just a little too verbose and we couldn't get through it all at one time. I mean, here we are, we're probably right at an hour, and the House has many, many more seats. So we're going to have to go through those pretty quickly for people. But I know that they really want to hear the outcomes and get our insights on what things are shaping up to look like this spring.
Absolutely. And I believe that when I look at it, when I survey the field, we have so many reasons to feel optimistic.
Yeah, we do. And you know what? It can be said that we have fought a good fight in this election cycle. And I think that the Lord has been faithful. and we will see a great outcome. I think, we have prayed for righteous leadership, and we have fought for righteous leadership. And so I very much expect to see that come January.
Yeah, and we've got several runoffs on the House side, a couple of runoffs on the House side that we're probably going to be involved in that are extremely important that we can also talk about in due course.
Indeed. Well, Chris, tell people how they can support LCAG and how they can get involved to support the candidates that we have been fighting for and candidates that we will continue to fight for going forward.
The reason, Danielle, why we have been able to be successful in promoting good candidates and good constitutional amendments, and really ultimately the cause of liberty, is because of the supporters, LCAG, Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. Your donations help us to have the resources that we need to help good candidates win, and also to have the resources to make sure that the bad representatives, their records are exposed broadly in any number of venues. So really, the infrastructure that we are building that enables us to get information to the people that is critical to them and their ability to make informed decisions is the direct result of your generosity toward LCAG. So thank you for your support of LCAG. We encourage you to continue to support. You can do it at lacag.org, lacag.org, and do it online, or you can mail a check to LACAG, P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70896. And I want all of you to feel very gratified and happy about the results that we have achieved, because they are the direct result of your support and your efforts and your commitment to our program.
Yes, and a lot of people put a lot of feet to their actions, to their support as well during this campaign season, and I expect they will continue to do that through the runoffs as well.
Oh, no question about it. No question about it. Well, Danielle, what about the State of Freedom?
Yes, just as a reminder to folks, if you're looking for a way to support us, to support the show, our website is freedomstate.us, and you can support us that way. You can send us feedback. You can inquire about advertising. We're looking forward to advertising on behalf of Louisiana First businesses who want to get their name out there. So just go to our website and you can do it there.
We are continuing to revolutionize the way political advocacy is done. There's no question in my mind that the success of a number of these candidates is the result of their ability to come on our show, which is rapidly expanding, and get their message out, which we have spread broadly to voters across Louisiana. No doubt, and we're continuing to grow every day. And with each day, Danielle, we are taking another step to preserve the state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, lacag.org, or email chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.